A 5-year-old girl was scavenging for survival when she found an abandoned baby. Without hesitation, she declared, "He's my brother now." But what she didn't know was that a millionaire was watching from his luxury car and recognized a mark that would change both their lives forever, a small scar on her left eyebrow identical to his own and to the one his lost daughter would have. What happened next challenged everything we know about fate, family, and redemption. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The sun hadn't yet risen when the girl awoke among the damp cardboard boxes she called a bed. Her large, expressive eyes scanned the surroundings of the city market, assessing the risks of the new day. At 5 years old, she already possessed the street smarts of someone who'd learned to survive on the streets since she could remember. Her small, bare feet touched the cold concrete. Hunger gnawed at her thin stomach, reminding her that she needed to find something to eat before the vendors arrived and chased her away. She knew the routine well. Wake up before everyone else, search for food, hide during the day, and repeat the cycle endlessly. The girl walked through the still deserted streets, observing every detail around her. Her unkempt hair bounced as she moved with the agility of someone who knew every shadow, every safe corner of the city. Despite the harshness of her reality, there was something in her eyes that refused to break, a spark of hope that resisted all adversity. Across town, in a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of a mirrored building, a man contemplated the sunrise through enormous glass windows. His imposing silhouette stood out against the golden light that flooded the luxurious environment. He wore a dark silk robe, and his grey eyes reflected a deep melancholy that contrasted with all the splendor around him. The millionaire was known for his coldness in business and his social isolation. At 42, he had built a business empire that placed him among the richest men in the country, but all that wealth couldn't fill the emptiness he carried in his chest since he lost his family years ago. He unconsciously touched the small scar on his left eyebrow, a mark he had gained as a child in a household accident. It was an automatic gesture he made whenever he felt particularly lonely. That scar reminded him of simpler times, when he still believed that money wasn't everything in life. His morning routine was always the same: black coffee, checking international stock quotes, reviewing a schedule full of commitments that kept him busy enough not to think about what he had lost. That morning, however, something was bothering him more than usual. Maybe it was the date, the anniversary of the last time he'd seen his daughter, or maybe it was just the accumulated weight of so many years of loneliness. Meanwhile, the girl had arrived near the trash bins of the central market. It was there that she found the best food scraps, but also where she ran the greatest risk of being seen by adults who didn't sympathize with her presence. She cautiously approached a large trash bin, her small arms barely able to reach the inside of the metal container. With precise movements, she rummaged through the torn plastic bags, looking for something edible. Her small, dirty hands touched mashed fruit, hardened bread, vegetable scraps that could still be used. Each discovery was a small treasure that she carefully stored in a plastic bag she always carried with her. The millionaire at that same moment was leaving his penthouse for the office. His personal driver was waiting for him with the luxury car, an imported black model that cost more than many people would earn in a lifetime. He settled into the leather back seat, closed his eyes, and tried to mentally prepare himself for another day of meetings and decisions that, although important for his business, seemed increasingly empty of meaning. The car glided through the city streets, passing through neighborhoods he knew only by name. It was a completely different world from his, where ordinary people lived their ordinary lives, facing problems he had forgotten existed. Through the dark glass, he watched absent-mindedly the urban landscape that changed gradually as they approached the business center. The girl, still focused on her search for food, didn't notice that there was something different in that specific trash bin. At the bottom, among the garbage bags, something was moving lightly. An almost imperceptible sound reached her sharp ears, a weak, muffled cry, almost human. She stopped immediately, focusing all her attention on that strange noise. Her heart began to beat faster. She knew all the sounds of the streets, knew how to distinguish the meowing of cats from normal urban noises. But that was different. It was the sound of something very small, very fragile, asking for help in a way that she instinctively recognized. With extra care, the girl approached the trash bin, trying to locate the origin of that weak cry. Her small hands trembled as she pushed the garbage bags aside, creating a path to the bottom of the metal container. The crying became clearer with each movement, and her heart raced with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Finally, her fingers touched something soft, wrapped in a dirty cloth. It was small, very small, and moved with weak, desperate movements. The girl carefully pulled the bundle towards her, and when she opened the grimy cloth, her eyes widened with surprise and compassion. It was a baby, a newborn, no more than a few days old, with reddish skin and closed eyes, crying in a voice so weak that it sounded more like a whisper. The small body was trembling with cold, and the girl could see that he was hungry and scared. Someone had abandoned that child there, as if he were disposable trash. Without hesitating for a second, the girl held the baby against her chest, wrapping him with her own torn coat. It was a small, worn piece of clothing, but it was all she had to offer. Her words came out firm and determined, loaded with a maturity that did not match her only 5 years of age. "He's my brother now." At that moment, as she gently rocked the baby in her arms, trying to calm him with a lullaby she had heard somewhere in her distant memory, the millionaire's car stopped at the traffic light nearby. The businessman, who was distracted by his thoughts, had his attention captured by the unusual scene unfolding on the sidewalk. Through the car window, he saw a very small girl holding something against her chest. There was something about her posture, the way she protectively cradled what she carried, that touched something deep within his memory. It was a maternal gesture, instinctive, that dramatically contrasted with the child's tender age. The driver commented absently on the traffic, but the millionaire didn't hear him. His eyes remained fixed on the girl, observing every detail of that scene. When she turned her face slightly in his direction, he felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. There, on the girl's left eyebrow, was a small scar. It was identical to his own mark, the same size in the exact same position. But what truly took his breath away was the sudden memory that his lost daughter, if she were alive, would also carry that same mark. It was a genetic characteristic that passed from generation to generation in his family. "Sir, the light's green," the driver said, noticing that his boss had become completely still in the back seat. "Pull over," the millionaire ordered in a hoarse voice, still unable to take his eyes off the girl. "Sir? Pull the car over now." The driver, surprised by the urgency in his boss's voice, parked in the first available spot. The millionaire hastily got out of the vehicle, his eyes never losing sight of the girl, who was now slowly walking down the sidewalk, whispering words of endearment to the baby in her arms. He followed her at a safe distance, his heart beating with a force he hadn't felt in years. That scar could just be a coincidence, but something within him told him it wasn't. There was something about that child, the way she moved, the determination in her gestures that awakened dormant memories. The girl, completely oblivious to the fact that she was being watched, continued her walk toward her usual refuge. She spoke softly to the baby, promising him that she would find milk, that she would keep him warm, that he would never be alone again. Her words were filled with a responsibility that no child should carry, but that she took on with naturalness. "Don't worry, my little brother," she murmured, adjusting the cloth around the small body. "I'll take care of you. Nobody's going to hurt us." The millionaire, maintaining a respectful distance, watched as she headed towards a more isolated area of the city, where abandoned buildings offered shelter for the homeless. He had never set foot in that part of the city, never bothered to know that reality that existed so close to his world of luxury. When the girl finally settled in a small space between two abandoned buildings, carefully organizing some cardboard and cloths to create a safe nest for the baby, the millionaire felt a mixture of admiration and horror. Admiration for the courage and determination of that small child, and horror at realizing the conditions in which she lived. He stayed there for almost an hour, hidden behind a wall, watching how she took care of the baby with a dedication that many adults wouldn't demonstrate. She had gotten some powdered milk from somewhere and prepared an improvised bottle, testing the temperature on her own skin before offering it to the newborn. When he finally returned to the car, the millionaire was transformed. That scar, that determination, that ability to love unconditionally, all that reminded him of someone very special he had lost. And if his suspicions were correct, he had just found the most precious thing he thought he'd lost forever. Throughout the morning meeting, the millionaire could barely concentrate on the financial reports and profit projections that usually captured all his attention. His mind constantly returned to the image of that girl holding the baby, to that scar that could mean everything or nothing, to the impossible possibility that he couldn't get out of his head. His partners noticed his distraction, but no one dared to comment. He was known for his precision and unwavering focus in business, so seeing him scattered was something unusual and disturbing. When the meeting finally ended, he locked himself in his office and tried to rationalize what had happened. "It's impossible," he murmured to himself, pacing back and forth behind his mahogany desk. "Millions of people can have similar scars. It means nothing." But even as he tried to convince himself, his hands trembled slightly. 8 years ago, his wife had been deceived by an illegal adoption ring. She had given the baby to what she believed was a loving family, only to discover later that the child had been sold on the black market. Despite all the financial resources and connections he possessed, he never managed to find his daughter. The search had consumed the first years after the disappearance, putting unbearable pressure on his marriage, already shaken by the loss. His wife, consumed by guilt and despair, ended up not resisting the emotional pressure and died in a car accident while driving under the influence of medication for depression. He was left alone with his pain and his guilt, building ever higher walls around his heart. Now, looking out the window of his office at the city that stretched below, he wondered if he was simply seeing things he wanted to see. Had his loneliness reached the point of making him create non-existent connections? Was that girl just another street child, and was he projecting his deepest desires onto her? "Sir?" His secretary's voice interrupted him through the intercom. "You missed the 2 o'clock meeting. The investors are waiting." "Cancel it," he replied abruptly. "Cancel all appointments for today." There was a surprised pause on the other end of the line. In 15 years of working for him, his secretary had never seen him cancel important meetings without an apparent reason. "Sir, it's the investors from the shopping center project. They came especially from abroad to—" I said cancel it. He switched off the intercom and resumed pacing the office. His rational mind screamed that he was being ridiculous, that he should forget that morning and get back to work. But something deeper, something he had tried to bury for years, insisted that he couldn't simply ignore what he had seen. Finally, he made a decision that surprised himself. He picked up the phone and called the best private investigator in the city, a discreet man who had provided confidential services for him in the past. "I need you to find information about a child," he said when the investigator answered. "A girl, approximately 5 years old, who lives on the streets near the city market. Any specific characteristics?" "Scar on her left eyebrow, brown hair, big eyes. She was taking care of a newborn baby." The investigator jotted down the information without asking questions. He was paid well to be discreet and efficient, not to satisfy his curiosity. "How soon do you need this?" "I want everything you can find by tomorrow morning." After hanging up, the millionaire sat in his leather armchair, looking at the framed photo he kept in his desk drawer. It was the only photo he had of his daughter, an ultrasound from when she was still in her mother's womb. He kept it there, hidden, because it hurt too much to look at it frequently. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and speculation. He tried to work, but the numbers on the spreadsheet seemed to dance before his eyes. He tried to read, but the words didn't make sense. He tried to eat, but the food had no taste. All he could think about was that girl and that scar. When he finally got home that night, his luxurious penthouse seemed even emptier than usual. He walked through the silent rooms, looking at the expensive furniture and works of art that brought him no joy. It seemed ironic that a man so rich could feel so miserable. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and stood before the window looking at the city lights. Somewhere out there in that darkness dotted with light, a very small girl was taking care of an abandoned baby. The image wouldn't leave his head. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel hope. It was dangerous, he knew. Hope had almost destroyed him before, when he spent years searching for his daughter without finding any trace. But even knowing the risks, he couldn't prevent a small flame from igniting in his chest. If that girl was really his daughter, if fate had decided to return her to him so unexpectedly, then he would do anything to bring her back. No matter how much it cost, no matter what obstacles he had to face, he had lost 8 years of his life, and he wouldn't lose another day. But if he was wrong, if it was just his imagination creating connections where they didn't exist, then he would need to find a way to help that brave child anyway, because after seeing her taking care of that baby with so much love and determination, he couldn't simply ignore her existence. The next morning, the millionaire woke up earlier than usual, anxious for the results of the investigation. He hadn't slept well, waking up several times during the night with fragmented dreams about lost children and impossible reunions. When his phone finally rang at 7 in the morning, he answered even before the second ring. "I found some interesting information," said the investigator's voice on the other end of the line. "The girl's name is... well, actually, no one knows her real name. People in the area know her only as the Little One. She appeared on the streets about 3 years ago, at approximately 2 years old." The millionaire's heart raced. The dates matched perfectly with his daughter's disappearance. "Go on." "Apparently, she was found wandering alone by a couple of homeless people who tried to take care of her for a while. But they disappeared about a year ago, and since then, she's been living on her own. She's known in the area for being extremely intelligent and independent for her age." "And what about the baby?" "That's recent. She found him just yesterday, exactly as you described. Some people at the market commented that she's been saying he's her brother and that she's going to protect him no matter what." The investigator paused before continuing. "Sir, there's something else. I got some information about her background. There are records that a child with her characteristics was last seen in a clandestine shelter that was shut down by the police 3 years ago. The shelter was involved in illegal activities related to adoption." The millionaire closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of pain and hope. It was exactly the kind of place where his daughter could have ended up after being sold by the criminals who deceived his wife. "I want you to keep investigating. And I want you to be discreet when approaching her. Don't scare her. Are you planning to make contact?" "Yes, but I need to do it the right way." After hanging up, the millionaire spent the morning planning his approach. He couldn't simply appear in front of a traumatized child and claim to be her father. He needed to gain her trust first, understand her situation, and then perhaps look for ways to confirm his suspicions. He decided to start by observing from afar, learning about her habits, understanding her world. He changed his expensive suit for simpler clothes and asked his driver to drop him off a few blocks away from where she usually stayed. Walking through those streets was a completely new experience for him. He hadn't set foot in the poorer areas of the city for decades, and the reality he found shocked him deeply. Children playing among the trash, adults sleeping on the sidewalks, small improvised businesses selling dubious food. It was a parallel world that existed right under his nose. He found a small diner near where he had seen the girl the day before, and settled at a table that gave him a good view of the area. He ordered a coffee and pretended to read a newspaper while discreetly observing the surroundings. It wasn't long before she appeared. Even from a distance, he recognized her immediately by the way she moved, cautious but determined. She was carrying the baby wrapped in clean cloths and had gotten a proper bottle from somewhere. Seeing her taking care of the child with so much dedication made his chest tighten with emotion. She went to a small park nearby and sat on a bench, positioning the baby carefully in her arms before giving him the bottle. Even from that distance, the millionaire could see the concentration on her small face, the way she constantly checked if the baby was comfortable. "Poor thing," commented the waitress from the diner, noticing what he was observing. "She's been coming here for a few days with that little baby. They say she found him in the trash and decided to raise him like her brother. Does she come here often?" "Every day, around this time. Sometimes I save some leftover bread to give her. A child shouldn't go hungry. Tell her it's from a customer who cares about children." The waitress smiled and took the bag with the food. The millionaire watched as she approached the girl and offered the food. He saw how the little one's eyes lit up with gratitude, how she immediately set aside a portion for later and began to eat the rest slowly, savoring each bite. It was then that something happened that caught him completely off guard. The girl looked in the direction of the diner, scanned the customers with her eyes until she found his, and gave a slight nod. It was a small gesture, but loaded with meaning. She knew he was there. She knew he had sent the food, and she was thanking him. In that moment, looking directly into the eyes of that brave child, the millionaire was absolutely certain that he was looking at his daughter. It wasn't just the scar. It wasn't just the circumstances that fit perfectly. It was something deeper, an instant connection that he felt the moment their eyes met. She was his daughter. After 8 years of searching and despair, she was there, less than 50 yards away, taking care of another abandoned baby with the same determination that he imagined his wife would have shown. Now he just needed to figure out how to bring her home. Over the next few days, the millionaire established a careful routine. Every morning, he traded his business suits for simple clothes and went to the small diner, always at the same time the girl usually appeared. He had instructed his employees to redistribute his appointments, alleging health problems that required a slower pace of work. The diner's waitress, a middle-aged lady named Mrs. Rose, had become his unwitting accomplice. She seemed genuinely concerned about the girl and was pleased to discover that someone else also cared about the child's well-being. "She came earlier today," commented Mrs. Rose, serving him his usual coffee. "The little baby was crying a lot. I think he's getting sick." The millionaire looked in the direction of the park and saw that the girl seemed more agitated than usual. She was rocking the baby constantly, whispering words of comfort, but the child kept crying weakly. Even from a distance, he could see the worry etched on her small face. "Mrs. Rose," he said, making an impulsive decision, "do you know any pediatrician who sees people in difficult financial situations?" "I do. Dr. Martinez. He has an office nearby and always helps those who can't pay. Good man. Could you talk to the girl? See if she would agree to take the baby for an appointment. I'll pay all the costs." Mrs. Rose looked at him with curiosity, but didn't ask questions. She had already realized that this well-dressed man, despite the simple clothes, wasn't exactly what he seemed. But if he wanted to help the girl, she was happy to be an intermediary. The millionaire watched anxiously as Mrs. Rose approached the girl. He saw the two of them talking for a few minutes, the girl initially distrustful, then gradually more receptive. When Mrs. Rose returned, She had a smile on her face. She agreed, but she has one condition. She wants me to go with her. She doesn't trust strangers. Perfect. When? Now, if you want. Dr. Martinez said he can see us. What followed was one of the most emotional and painful experiences of the millionaire's life. He accompanied Mrs. Rose and the girl to the doctor's office, always keeping a respectful distance, but observing every detail. The girl was extraordinarily mature for her age. She answered the doctor's questions with precision, described the baby's symptoms with details that many adults couldn't provide, and demonstrated an intuitive knowledge of childcare that impressed the professional. "Where did you learn so much about babies?" asked Dr. Martinez kindly. "I always knew," she replied simply. "When I was little, before I was alone, someone taught me. I don't remember who, but I remember the things." The millionaire felt his throat tighten. His wife had read dozens of books on motherhood during her pregnancy, always talking about how she would teach her daughter to care for other children when she grew up. Could it be that somehow those teachings had been recorded in the girl's memory? The baby's diagnosis was reassuring, just a common cold, easily treatable with proper medication and basic care. Dr. Martinez prescribed the medicines and gave detailed instructions on how to administer them. "You're doing an excellent job taking care of him," the doctor said to the girl. "He's lucky to have such a dedicated sister." The millionaire saw the girl's eyes shine with pride and satisfaction. For her, that baby really was her brother, as real as any blood tie. When they left the doctor's office, the girl approached Mrs. Rose and whispered something in her ear. The waitress nodded and turned to the millionaire. "She wants to personally thank the man who paid for the appointment." The millionaire's heart almost stopped. It was the first time she had shown a willingness to interact directly with him. He approached slowly, taking care not to make any sudden movements that could frighten her. When he got close enough, she raised her big eyes and looked directly at him. In that moment, seeing her up close, he was absolutely certain that he was looking at his daughter. The facial features, the color of the eyes, even the way she tilted her head slightly when she was thinking, everything was exactly as he had imagined she would be. "Thank you," she said in her small but firm voice. "The doctor said my little brother will be okay." "You're welcome," he managed to reply, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You deserve to be taken care of." She studied him for a moment with that intensity that only very intelligent children possess. Then, surprisingly, she extended one of her small, dirty hands towards him. "My name is, well, people call me Little One, but I know I have a real name. I just don't remember what it is." He took her little hand with infinite care, as if he were touching something sacred. Her skin was rough from the conditions she lived in, but still retained the delicacy of a child. "My name is Michael," he said, using his real name for the first time in years, with someone not related to business. "And I think you're a very special girl." She smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. And in that moment, he knew he would do anything to protect her, regardless of whether she was his biological daughter or not. "You seem like a good person," she said, still holding his hand. "Most adults don't care about kids like me and my little brother." "I do," he replied, and he meant every word. "And if you ever need anything at all, you can come to me. Mrs. Rose knows how to find me." She nodded solemnly, as if they were making an important agreement. Then she walked away, carrying the baby with renewed care, now equipped with the medicines he needed to get better. As he watched her walk away, the millionaire made a decision that would change everything. He could no longer simply observe from afar. He needed definitive proof of her identity, and if his suspicions were confirmed, he would need a plan to bring her back into his life in a way that wouldn't traumatize her further. That night, he made 2 important calls. The first was to the private investigator, asking for an even deeper investigation into the girl's past. The second was to a family law attorney, someone who could guide him on the legal aspects of such a complex situation. The third call, the most difficult of all, was to a lab specializing in DNA testing. It was time to discover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. 2 weeks had passed since the first direct encounter between the millionaire and the girl. During this period, he had established a routine of small kindnesses: food through Mrs. Rose, diapers and milk for the baby, clean blankets that appeared mysteriously where they slept. The girl had become accustomed to these kindnesses, always thanking him through Mrs. Rose, but maintaining a safe distance from the unknown benefactor. The investigator had obtained crucial information. He had located a nurse who had worked at the clandestine shelter shut down 3 years ago, and she clearly remembered a small girl with a scar on her eyebrow who had disappeared during the chaos of the institution's closure. She had come to the shelter as a baby, the investigator reported by phone. The records were all falsified, but the nurse remembers that she was brought by intermediaries who claimed that the mother had died and there were no relatives. The child had false documents, but there were details that didn't add up. What kind of details? The nurse said she had very expensive clothes for a child, supposedly orphaned from a poor family, and there was a small gold bracelet on her wrist, with initials engraved. The nurse kept the bracelet, thinking of returning it one day. The millionaire's heart raced. He remembered perfectly the bracelet that his wife had ordered for their daughter, a small gold chain with the initials SM for Sophia Marie, the name they had chosen for her. Where is this bracelet now? The nurse still has it. She agreed to meet you tomorrow. The meeting took place in a small, discreet coffee shop. The nurse, a 50-year-old woman with kind but tired eyes, brought a small old jewelry box. When he opened it, the millionaire felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. There was the little gold bracelet he had seen his wife put on his newborn daughter's tiny wrist. The initials SM shone discreetly in the light of the coffee shop, exactly as he remembered. "I always hoped that someone would come looking for her," said the nurse with a choked voice. "She was a special child, very intelligent and caring. When the shelter closed and she disappeared, I prayed that she had found a good family." "She didn't," the millionaire replied, his voice barely managing to come out. "She's been living on the streets ever since." The nurse closed her eyes, clearly shaken by the news. "I should have done more. I should have tried to protect her when everything fell apart. You couldn't have known. But now, I can do something." He took the bracelet with trembling hands. It was the final proof he needed, but he also wanted scientific confirmation. He had obtained some DNA samples from the girl through a cup she had used at the doctor's office, and the test results arrived that same afternoon. When he opened the sealed envelope, the words danced before his eyes for a moment before they stabilized. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Sophia, his little Sophia, whom he had searched for 8 desperate years, was alive. Not only alive, but had become an extraordinary child, capable of surviving the worst adversities and still maintaining her ability to love and protect the most vulnerable. He sat on the floor of his office and cried. He cried for the wife who had died without knowing that her daughter was alive. He cried for the 8 lost years, for the nights that Sophia had spent cold and hungry while he slept in his luxurious bed. He cried with relief for having found her, and with fear for what was yet to come. When he finally managed to compose himself, he knew that the next step would be the most difficult of all. He couldn't simply appear to Sophia and announce that he was her father. She had developed very strong defense mechanisms, and any false move could make her run away with the baby, possibly forever. He needed a careful plan, with the help of professionals specializing in child trauma. But before anything else, he needed to ensure that she and the baby were safe and well cared for. That night, he made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He bought a small, simple apartment in the neighborhood where Sophia lived and began to spend his nights there, discreetly observing the surroundings, making sure she was safe. It was the first step of a journey that he knew would be long and complex. But for the first time in 8 years, he had real hope. His daughter was alive. She was an extraordinary child, and he would do anything to bring her home, but this time, the right way. The next day, he woke up with a renewed determination. It was time to start building a bridge between his world and her world, brick by brick, with all the patience and love he could muster, because Sophia, his Sophia, deserved to have a real family, and he would spend the rest of his life making up for the years she had lost. The millionaire's plan to gradually approach Sophia was brutally interrupted on a cold September morning. He had just arrived at the small diner for his daily vigil when he saw a scene that made his blood run cold. 2 men in suits were talking to Mrs. Rose, showing official documents and photographs. They were social workers, and they were there because of anonymous reports about an unaccompanied minor caring for an abandoned baby. Someone had reported Sophia and the baby to the authorities, and now they were being sought to be taken to separate shelters. "Where do they usually stay?" asked one of the men, showing a blurred photo of Sophia that someone had secretly taken. Mrs. Rose, visibly uncomfortable, was trying to buy time. "Look, you don't understand. She takes very good care of the little baby. I've never seen a child so responsible. Ma'am, with all due respect, a 5-year-old child cannot raise a baby alone. It's dangerous for both of them." The millionaire felt pure panic. If they took Sophia now, she would enter the official system, be separated from the baby she considered her brother, and he would lose any chance of gradually recovering her. Worse, she could be adopted by another family before he could legally prove his paternity. He got up abruptly and left the diner, running in the direction of the spot where Sophia usually spent her mornings. He needed to warn her. He needed to protect her, even if it meant revealing his identity before the planned time. He found her in the small park, sitting on her usual bench, humming softly to the baby who was sleeping in her arms. She was so focused on her maternal task that she didn't see him approach until he was very close. "Sophia," he said, using her real name for the first time. She looked up, surprised. "How do you know my name? I never said—" "Because I know who you are, and I know who I am to you." There was something in the tone of his voice that made Sophia immediately become alert. She stood up, holding the baby even tighter, her survival instincts triggered. "You don't need to be afraid of me," he continued, keeping his hands visible and his voice calm. "But there are men looking for you. Men who want to separate you." As if it were a signal, they could hear voices approaching down the street. The social workers had gotten information from Mrs. Rose and were coming towards the park. Sophia looked around like a cornered animal, looking for a way out. But there were only a few limited options, and she knew the dangers of running through the streets carrying a baby. "Come with me," said the millionaire, extending his hand to her. "I can protect you both." "Why?" she asked, her voice small but defiant. "Why do you care?" He knelt in front of her, placing himself at her eye level. With trembling hands, he took out of his pocket the small gold bracelet he had recovered from the nurse. "Because this bracelet belongs to you, because you are my daughter, Sophia. And I've spent the last 8 years of my life looking for you." Sophia looked at the bracelet, then at his face, then again at the bracelet. Something in her expression changed. Not recognition exactly, but a kind of deep resonance, as if a very buried part of her memory was being touched. "My daughter," she repeated, the word sounding strange in her mouth. The voices of the social workers were getting closer. They no longer had time for detailed explanations. "Sophia, I know it's a lot to process. I know you have no reason to trust me. But if you come with me now, I promise that I will never let anyone separate you two again. You and your little brother will stay together always." She stared at him for a long moment, her large, intelligent eyes assessing every detail of his expression. The baby chose that moment to wake up and begin to cry softly, and Sophia automatically began to rock him and whisper words of comfort. "If I go with you," she said finally, "you promise that no one will take him away from me." "I promise. And you promise that if I don't like it, you'll let us go?" "I promise," he lied, knowing that he would never let her go back to the streets, but understanding that she needed to feel that she had control over the situation. Sophia nodded once, with the seriousness of someone much older. "Then let's go." She picked up her small backpack with the few belongings she possessed and followed the millionaire in the opposite direction of the social workers. As they walked quickly through the streets, he called his driver, asking to be picked up at a discreet location. Throughout the journey to her temporary apartment in the neighborhood, Sophia remained silent, observing everything around her with intense attention. She did not let go of the baby for a second and kept her backpack always within reach. When they finally arrived at the simple apartment he had prepared, she inspected each room carefully before sitting on the edge of the sofa, still holding the baby. "So," she said, her small voice echoing in the silence of the apartment, "you say you're my father." "I am. Where were you when I needed you?" The question was like a sharp blade straight to his heart. Because she was right. Where had he been when she was sleeping cold, when she was hungry, when she faced dangers that no child should face? "I was looking for you," he replied, his voice choked. "Every day for 8 years. But the people who took you from me did a very good job of hiding you." Sophia studied him for a long moment. "And my mother, your mother died looking for you too." Tears shone in the girl's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she hugged the baby tighter and whispered, "At least now he won't grow up without a family like I did." In that moment, the millionaire realized that his journey to recover his daughter had only just begun. Because Sophia was no longer the helpless baby who had been stolen from him. She had become a complex, traumatized, but extraordinarily strong child, and winning her love and trust would be the greatest challenge of his life. The first few days in the apartment were a delicate dance between approach and resistance. Sophia had agreed to stay, but had made it clear that her primary loyalty was to the baby she called her brother. She established strict rules. The baby slept next to her, she prepared the bottles herself, and any decision about him needed to pass her approval first. The millionaire, accustomed to having total control over his life and his business, discovered that he needed to learn a completely new language. The language of parenting a traumatized child. He discreetly hired a child psychologist specializing in trauma and abandonment, Dr. Carolyn Mendez, who guided him on how to proceed. "She's testing you," Dr. Carolyn explained during one of their weekly consultations. "Sophia has spent years developing survival mechanisms. She needs to be sure that you won't abandon her again before she allows you completely into her life. But I never abandoned her. She was stolen from me. To her mind, that doesn't matter. What matters is that one day she had a family, and the next day she was alone. Now she needs to know if she can trust that this won't happen again." Mornings became the most important time of the day. Sophia had established a rigorous routine for caring for the baby and gradually allowed the millionaire to participate. First, he just watched as she prepared the bottle. Then, she let him hold the baby while she organized the diapers. Slowly, very slowly, she began to accept his help. The turning point came on a night when the baby became ill with a fever. Sophia, despite all her precocious maturity, was still a 5-year-old child, and the fear of losing her little brother made her panic. "He's very hot," she said, tears streaming down her face for the first time since they had met. "What if he dies? What if I can't save him?" The millionaire, who had spent the last few weeks walking on eggshells around her, finally acted with the paternal instinct he had suppressed for so long. He picked her up, along with the baby, and held her while she cried. "He's not going to die," he said firmly. "We're going to take care of him together. You're not alone anymore, Sophia. Never again." They spent the whole night taking turns caring for the baby, administering medication, checking his temperature, offering water and affection. When dawn arrived and the fever finally broke, Sophia was sleeping curled up in the millionaire's arm, with the baby resting peacefully between them. It was in that moment that he truly understood what it meant to be a father. It wasn't about providing financially or making executive decisions. It was about being present in moments of fear, offering comfort when the world seemed scary, and creating an environment where a child could finally let her guard down and just be a child. From that night on, Sophia began calling the baby our baby instead of my little brother. It was a subtle but significant change. She was beginning to accept that they formed a family unit, even though she still couldn't call him Dad. The following weeks brought small daily miracles. Sophia laughed for the first time when he tried to change a diaper and made a complete mess. She asked for help to reach something high without hesitation. She began to tell stories about her days on the streets, not with sadness, but as adventures she had overcome. More importantly, she began to make plans for the future. "When our baby grows up," she would say, "I'm going to teach him to read. And when he goes to school, I'm going to go with him to make sure no one is mean to him." The millionaire realized that Sophia had created her own definition of family, not based on blood or legalities, but on mutual care and protection. And slowly, he was being accepted into that definition. Dr. Carolyn was impressed with the progress. "She's starting to trust," she said during one of their consultations. "But there are still obstacles ahead. At some point, you're going to need to deal with the legal issues, and she's going to need to face the full trauma of what she's been through." The millionaire knew she was right. They had created a bubble of safety in the apartment, but the outside world was still a threat. The social workers were still looking for Sophia. He still hadn't formalized any custody process, and there were people in his professional life who were starting to ask questions about his prolonged absence from business. But for the first time in 8 years, he had his priority clear. Everything else, business, money, social status, was secondary. His family, his small and improvised family, was all that mattered, and he would do anything to protect her. The fragile peace they had built was threatened one morning when the millionaire received a call that changed everything. It was his lawyer, with news that he had feared since the day he brought Sophia home. "They found you," said the tense voice on the other end of the line. "Social services have filed a lawsuit. They want immediate custody of the girl and the baby, claiming that you're harboring them illegally." The millionaire's blood ran cold. "How did they find out?" "Someone close to you made the report. I suspect it was your minority partner, Edward Carter. He's been questioning your frequent absences and hired private investigators." Edward Carter, the man who had always envied his position in the company and who had, in recent months, been questioning his decisions and trying to take more control of the business. Apparently, he had found out about Sophia and decided to use this information as a weapon. "How much time do we have?" "Hours. They're going to arrive with a court order today. Unless you can legally prove that you are the girl's father and that you have suitable conditions to raise both children, they're going to take them." The millionaire looked at Sophia, who was on the floor of the living room playing with the baby, humming a song she had invented. She had begun to smile more often, to relax, to act like a normal child. The idea of unknown men invading this safe space and forcibly dragging her away filled him with a fury he didn't know he possessed. "Prepare all the documents," he said with a determined voice. "Paternity test, proof of income, everything, and hire the best family lawyers you can find. I'm already arranging it, but no buts. Make it happen." He hung up and turned to Sophia, who had stopped singing and was watching him with that sharp perception that she had developed to detect danger. "Something's wrong," she said. It wasn't a question. He knelt beside her, taking care to keep his voice calm. "Sophia, do you remember when we talked about how sometimes adults make complicated rules?" She nodded, her big eyes becoming more serious. "Well, Some adults think that you two should be in different places. They don't understand that you're siblings and that you belong together. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers arrived at the apartment, turning the living room into a temporary office. Documents were reviewed, strategies were discussed, phone calls were made. The millionaire had mobilized all the resources he possessed, but he knew he was facing an uphill battle. Sophia watched everything with silent attention, holding the baby and occasionally whispering words of comfort in his ear. She had seen adults in crisis situations before, and she knew how to recognize when the situation was serious. When the social workers arrived, escorted by law enforcement officers, Sophia didn't run. Instead, she positioned herself in the center of the room, holding the baby, and faced the intruders with a dignity that left all the adults present impressed. "You must be Sophia," said the lead social worker, a middle-aged woman with a professional but not hostile expression. "My name is Dr. Regina Santos. We're here to help." "We don't need help," replied Sophia, her voice small but firm. "We have a family now." Dr. Regina looked around the room, noting the scattered toys, the clean bottles, the furniture adapted for a child. It was obvious that Sophia and the baby were being well cared for. "Sophia, do you understand that there are rules about how children should live? Rules that protect you?" "The rules never protected me before," Sophia replied. "He protects me," she pointed to the millionaire, "and I protect my brother." It was then that something happened that no one expected. The millionaire's lead attorney stood up and announced that they had an alternative proposal. "My client is willing to submit to a full psychological evaluation as well as a detailed investigation of his living conditions and financial capacity. In exchange, he requests that the children remain in his care during the process, under the supervision of social services." Dr. Regina considered the proposal. "And what guarantees that he won't simply disappear with the children?" "I guarantee it," said a voice from the door. Everyone turned to see Dr. Carolyn Mendez entering the room. "I am a child psychologist specializing in trauma, and I have been following this family for the last few weeks. I can attest that separating them now would be traumatic for both children, especially considering Sophia's history of abandonment." What followed were 2 hours of intense negotiation. In the end, a temporary agreement was reached. Sophia and the baby would remain with the millionaire for another 30 days, during which he would undergo rigorous evaluations. If he passed all the tests and could prove his ability to raise the children adequately, an official adoption process would be initiated. When all the officials finally left, Sophia was still holding the baby, but her small hands were trembling slightly. "You did it," she whispered. "You really protected us." "We protected each other," he corrected, "because we are a family, and families protect each other." For the first time since they had met, Sophia ran to him and hugged him, still holding the baby, and in that moment he knew that regardless of the challenges that still lay ahead, they had already won the most important battle. The battle for the right to be a family. 6 months later, life had settled into a routine that neither of them had imagined possible. The simple apartment had been replaced by a cozy home on the outskirts of the city, not a mansion, because Sophia had made it clear that she didn't want to live in a place too big to be a home, but a residence that offered safety, comfort, and most importantly, space for a family to grow. The social services evaluations had been approved with flying colors. The millionaire, who now insisted that Sophia call him only Dad, had demonstrated not only the financial capacity to raise the children, but also the emotional transformation needed to be the kind of father they needed. Dr. Carolyn had been instrumental in the process, documenting Sophia's extraordinary progress and the healthy adaptation of the baby, who now went by the name of Gabriel, a name chosen by Sophia because it means messenger of God, and he was the one who brought our family back together. The morning always began the same way. Sophia woke up first, as she always had since her days on the streets. But now it was to check if Gabriel was okay and help prepare breakfast. She had enrolled in the local school and after an initial period of adjustment was thriving academically. Her teachers were impressed with her maturity and leadership skills, especially with the younger children. Gabriel, now almost a year old, had become a healthy and cheerful child who called Sophia Sissy and the millionaire Daddy with equal enthusiasm. He had no memory of the first difficult days of his life, only of the love and security that surrounded him since he could remember. The relationship between father and daughter had evolved in a natural and profound way. Sophia still maintained some of her protective instincts. She always checked if the doors were locked before going to sleep and kept a small backpack with emergency supplies hidden in her room, just in case. But she had learned to truly trust. She told stories about school during dinner, asked for help with homework, and had even begun to talk about her dreams for the future. "When I grow up," she said one afternoon as she helped Gabriel take his first wobbly steps, "I want to work with children who don't have a family, to help them find their real parents like you found me." The millionaire, watching his daughter guide her adopted brother's steps patiently, felt his heart swell with pride and love. Sophia had kept her compassion intact despite everything she had been through. More than that, she had transformed her painful experiences into empathy and determination to help others. On weekends, they visited local shelters, where Sophia distributed toys and clothes that she no longer used. She had insisted on these visits, saying that the kids there need to know that someone cares about them. During these visits, she demonstrated a natural ability to connect with traumatized children, offering them hope through her own story of overcoming adversity. The millionaire had fundamentally changed as well. His company was still thriving, but he had delegated more responsibilities so he could be present in his children's lives. Edward Carter, the partner who had tried to harm them, had been bought out and removed from the company, but it was done without rancor. The millionaire had learned that happiness was a much better revenge than any retaliation. On silent nights, after the children were asleep, he often found himself looking out the living room window, reflecting on the miracle of how their lives had intertwined. A girl discarded in the trash of society had found an abandoned baby and decided to save him. That act of pure love had set in motion a series of events that brought them all home. The little gold bracelet now rested on Sophia's wrist again, polished and gleaming. She wore it every day, not as a relic of the past, but as a symbol of continuity, a bridge between the baby she had been and the strong girl she had become. On a particularly significant night, as she tucked Gabriel into his bed, Sophia asked a question that caught the millionaire off guard. "Dad," she said, using the title that now came naturally to her lips, "do you think Mom would have liked me the way I am now?" He knelt beside her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Sophia, your mother dreamed of a daughter exactly like you. Brave, caring, capable of loving unconditionally. She would be very proud of the strong woman you are becoming. And would she have liked Gabriel too? She would have loved Gabriel as much as we do, because real families aren't just made of blood, they're made of choices, of deciding to take care of each other, protect each other, love each other, no matter what." Sophia smiled, a smile that lit up her whole face. "So we're a real family, aren't we?" "The realest there is," he confirmed, kissing her forehead. As she fell asleep, he remained there for a few minutes, watching his daughter's peaceful face. On the bedside table, there was a photo they had taken the week before, the three of them together in the park, Sophia pushing Gabriel on the swing while he watched with a smile he couldn't contain. It was the first family photo he had had in 8 years. In the next room, Gabriel was sleeping soundly, surrounded by the teddy bears that Sophia had carefully chosen for him. The baby, who had been discarded as trash, was now growing up knowing that he was loved, protected, and valued. He would never know the pain of abandonment because Sophia had chosen to save him, and that choice had saved them all. The millionaire went down to his home office and opened his laptop. There was an email waiting for him. Dr. Carolyn had sent the final report on the family's progress. It was being used as a case study on how traumatized children can heal when placed in genuinely loving and stable environments. Sophia demonstrates extraordinary resilience and the ability to form healthy bonds, the report stated. Her initial experience of abandonment, although traumatic, paradoxically developed in her a unique capacity to recognize and value true love when she finds it. Gabriel benefits tremendously from her presence, and both children have thrived in the stable family environment that has been created. The report continued describing how their story was being used to train social workers and psychologists on the importance of preserving unconventional family bonds and recognizing that sometimes families are formed in unexpected ways. That night, before bed, the millionaire did something that had become a ritual. He picked up the photo of his wife that he kept on his nightstand and whispered to her, "She's home, my love. Our Sophia is home. And she brought a little grandson to us. I know you would have loved them both unconditionally. They are exactly what we always dreamed of, our complete family." Finally, he put the photo away and looked out the window at the garden, where Sophia had planted flowers, so that Gabriel can learn about how beautiful things grow when they are cared for with love. The seedlings were already sprouting, promising vibrant colors for the approaching spring. From the trash had come the greatest treasure. From abandonment had been born the purest love. And from two children rejected by the world had emerged a family that was stronger than any material wealth could buy. Sophia had saved Gabriel that first day, but in truth, they had saved each other. Because sometimes families aren't born, they are chosen. And when that happens, the love that arises is capable of healing even the deepest wounds and building homes where once there was only abandonment. Their story was just beginning, but it was already complete in its essence. Three hearts that had found their way home, to each other, creating a home made of second chances, unconditional love, and the unwavering belief that no one is disposable when there is someone willing to see their true value. If this story has touched you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in the millionaire's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special.